If I had to relearn music production after 10 years, I'd do it backwards. Let me explain. When I first started producing, I would load 20 different plugins on a sound and pray it sounded good. But that's not at all what pros do. They hear the sound in their head first and then know exactly the right buttons to press to get it. But how? How can you hear a song and immediately know what to do? Well, turns out there is a way, and I'm calling it the backwards method. It'll train your ears to hear like a pro, cut years off of your learning curve, and make your tracks sound way better. I'm still workshopping names, but backwards method feels appropriate. Let me explain what the backward method even is. Instead of guessing and just throwing a bunch of random sounds together, you take an already finished track and discover what makes it work. This gives you much better results faster, and it also helps to train your ear to determine what good sounds are. It sounds simple in practice, and at its core, it is, but there are a lot of nuances and complications that can arise when trying to recreate another sound. Let me show you how to use the backwards method for yourself in 3 different levels. But before diving into these levels, go lick that subscribe button before the EQ drowns out my voice and you can't hear it anymore. Level 1, single sample matching. The best starting point for the backwards method will be drums. We're going to try to take the drum sounds from polished tracks and recreate them and find similar samples ourselves. What's cool is that nowadays with stem separation, this method becomes even more powerful. Here I have a quick example of a song that I really like, and I'm going to go into my stem splitter to isolate the drums so I can hear them better. Let's listen specifically for the kick drum in this kit. Let's go into Splice and see if we can find it for ourselves. I'm using Splice to help identify these sounds. You can use the stock ones from your DAW, but chances are that Splice will have a lot more of what you're looking for. I started off by searching through some kicks. Then I dragged the most similar ones into my project to test later. When I had 3 that were close, I opened up Drum Machine Designer and dragged them in. Then I muted them individually to see what sounded the most similar. Here's the original again. And here's what mine sounds like. You can rinse and repeat this method for the rest of the drum kit to find something that fits the genre that you're in very closely. Somebody out there needs to make an app that focuses on ear training from this backwards point of view. And to test if that's a good idea, I've actually made a mini quiz that you can go take to see how well you can actually match sounds to what they should be. It starts off pretty easy by letting you see what sounds the most like the original, but quickly gets pretty hard. For example, what timing is most like the original, or what sounds the most like the original vocal EQ. You can take this quiz for totally free, and you can see how good you are at unmixing the sounds as you hear them. And I think it's probably harder than you might think. Let's move on to level 2 of the backwards method, plug-in matching. This level is a bit harder than the last one. Instead of replicating a single kick drum, we're going to be using this with multiple plugins at the same time. That means we'll take a single sound source and add things like EQ, distortion, reverb to get something that sounds similar. Just like before, you can stem separate them out, isolate the part you want, and then work backwards like I just mentioned. In this case though, I want to start with something that's a bit higher quality than the stem separator can give me. So I'm going to work directly with a sample that I like from Splice, and then I'm going to try to deconstruct it and make it for you in real time. Here's a loop that sounds pretty cool I found in Splice. To build this sound, we need a little bit of an understanding of sound design. This video isn't as much about sound design as more of showing off the methodology that I would use to get better. To make this synth, I pulled up a new instance of Serum. I added a filter on a basic saw wave and was already most of the way there. Next, I figured what chords it was playing and recorded them in. The sound was pretty close at this point, but not exactly the same. So I spent the next few minutes tweaking some parameters to make it sound more similar. I added unison and LFO to make it move, another saw wave, some reverb, but it wasn't sounding exactly quite the same. So then I tried some different wave tables to see if I could get some slightly different flavors. Then I used a spectrum analyzer to compare the two. It showed me that I was missing one particular peak, which just meant that I was missing a note that it was playing in the original that I didn't have in my MIDI. So I added it to my track. And my synth was sounding mostly the same. Here's what the original sounded like. And here's what my recreation sounded like. And finally, on to level 3 of the backwards method, or unmixing. Level 3 is basically just using reference tracks, if you've ever heard that terminology before. We're going to use a song that we like that's in our genre to help balance the levels of our own track itself. This is extremely helpful in getting better sounds from the get-go, getting better mixes overall, and better masters. If you're really trying to up your game though, I'd highly recommend trying to recreate each part of a reference track, part for part, exactly the same, so you can see what producers are doing and try to figure out your way on how to get there. Once you recreate all the sounds of a track, then you can balance it exactly to that track and compare A and B to see where you're missing things, to see how close you can get. To show you how this works, I'm going to use this song starter I found on Splice so that I don't get demonetized by using a normal released song. Here's what it sounds like. Pretty vibey, pretty cool. I started the track recreation off by separating the stems of the original. Then I laid down the bass line I was hearing. And after, I found a sound with the bass that matched the original pretty closely. Next, I found a rim shot to copy to keep the groove. Then I recreated the bell sound that was happening in the beginning. I started from scratch in Serum and got something that sounded okay, but not nearly as realistic as the original. So I ended up scrapping that synth and finding a better sample in Omnisphere. Then I recorded the doos that were sung in the background. Big fan of these, by the way. I did some basic processing on them, mostly including EQ and massive reverb. I then did the same for the lead vocal, and after I formant shifted it so it sounded more like the original. I ended this recreation by recording the electric guitar. I then dragged down the trumpets from the stem splitter because I definitely don't play the trumpet, and my recreation was complete. Here's the original, and here's what mine sounded like. Not exactly perfect, but now I can use those sounds as a starting point for a song of my own. If you haven't already, go check out that quiz on backwards production in general and unmixing to see how well you do. And if you found this music production concept interesting, I'd highly recommend checking out this one right up here, which shows a 3D graph of the best way to mix all of your instruments.